Welcome to the 10-Minute Book Guide. Today we are diving deep into a truly monumental biography, Ron Chernow's Grant.
So think about this for a second. How can one man be all these things at once? A butcher and a peacemaker, a drunkard and the savior of the Union, a corrupt president and a champion for civil rights. For more than 100 years, Ulysses S. Grant has been this giant American puzzle. It's like his legacy is his battlefield of contradictions, a canvas where we've all kind of projected our own hopes and fears about America itself.
And that's where biographer Ron Chernow steps in. See, his book, Grant, isn't just another trip through someone's life. No, it's something way more ambitious. It's really an act of historical resurrection. Chernow argues that to solve the puzzle of who Grant really was, we first have to understand how his story was intentionally shattered.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the American enigma that is Grant, then unpack the powerful lost cause myth that basically destroyed his reputation. After that, we'll dive into how Chernow re-examines the evidence, look at his amazing literary resurrection of the man, and finally, we'll talk about why this is such a necessary history for us right now.
Right, let's get into it. The lost cause myth, how history buried a hero. So you gotta ask, how on earth did the man who saved the Union become one of history's biggest villains? Well, the answer isn't simple incompetence or bad luck. It was a deliberate, powerful, and incredibly effective propaganda campaign.
And that campaign had a name, the Lost Cause. Now, this wasn't just some misty-eyed nostalgia for the Old South. Oh no. This was a systematic, top-to-bottom effort to rewrite the history books. And think about it. If you want to make the Confederacies seem noble and romantic, you absolutely need a villain from the North. You need someone who represents a brutish, soulless victory. And Ulysses S. Grant, he was just tailor-made for the part.
And wow, look at the result. The lost cause narrative just flattened Grant into this one-dimensional cartoon villain. His mastery of strategy? Nope, that became brutish butcher. His incredible fight for civil rights as president? Completely erased, replaced with a simple story of corruption. And the quiet, deeply thoughtful man? He was turned into a clueless simpleton. Chernow's entire book, really, is dedicated to taking a sledgehammer to this myth, piece by painstaking piece.
Okay, so re-examining the evidence. How exactly does Chernow pull this off? Well, it's not with just a bunch of opinions. He does it with a relentless, overwhelming mountain of evidence. He builds his case like a prosecutor, laying out exhibit after exhibit, forcing us, the jury, to look at the facts, to look directly at the original sources.
And he organizes this whole case around three main pillars, each one designed to tear down one of the biggest lies ever told about Grant. We're talking about Grant the General, Grant the President, and finally, Grant the Man.
First up, Pillar 1, the General. Let's tackle that most damaging slander of all, Grant the Butcher. You know, this whole myth comes from the absolutely staggering Union casualties in 1864. But Chernow makes a powerful case that this wasn't just mindless slaughter. It was the grim, brutal, but totally coherent math of victory. He was up against an enemy that simply would not quit. See, Grant was the first Union general to think big picture. He had a total, theater-wide strategy to hit all the Confederate armies at the exact same time so they couldn't help each other out. Yeah, it was brutal, but you know what? It was also brilliant, and it worked.
And listen to this. In his own words, you can hear the man behind the general's coat. In a letter to his wife, Julia, he writes, "Oh, Julia, I have had a very, very hard time of it. The anxieties of the position I feel, but not so much as the sufferings of the poor men who do the fighting." I mean, just listen to that. That quote just demolishes the caricature of some callous butcher, doesn't it? That's the voice of a man in agony, a commander who felt the human cost of every single decision deep in his bones. This was no butcher. This was a leader absolutely crushed by the weight of his command.
All right, on to Pillar 2, the President. For the longest time, his presidency has been dismissed as this complete failure, just riddled with corruption. But what Chernow does here is maybe the most important part of the entire book. He argues that we've completely forgotten Grant's most profound legacy as president. He was the man who waged America's first war on domestic terror.
And that terrorism was, of course, the Ku Klux Klan. Now, Grant wasn't some passive observer, just watching their campaign of murder and voter suppression from the sidelines. No, he was personally deeply outraged. I mean, look at what he told his attorney general. It is a disgrace to any civilized country that such a state of affairs should exist. You can just feel the moral fury in those words. He saw the Klan for exactly what it was, a domestic terrorist group, and he decided he was going to use every ounce of federal power to crush them.
And he didn't just talk, he acted. He pushed a reluctant Congress to pass the Force Acts. He sent federal troops into the South to stamp out these terrorist campaigns. He even suspended habeas corpus to make sure Klansmen could be prosecuted. He was all in on enforcing the 14th and 15th Amendments. And because of this, he effectively smashed the first version of the KKK. For a short, really radical moment in time, Grant's presidency was the single biggest federal effort to protect civil rights that this country would see for another 100 years.
And that brings us to the third and final pillar, the man himself. This is the most intimate part of the case. Who was this famously quiet, almost painfully shy person? You know, the lost cause myth was simple. His silence meant he was stupid. But Chernow argues the complete opposite. His silence wasn't emptiness, it was the protective shell around a deep, complex, and sensitive inner world. And the most powerful proof? It comes from Grant's own pen. This one sentence from his memoirs, describing the moment of Lee's surrender at Appomattox, it's just incredible. He says, "I felt sad and depressed at the downfall of a foe who had fought so long and valiantly, for a cause, though that cause was, I believe, one of the worst for which a people ever fought." Just think about that balance. He feels real empathy for the defeated soldiers, but at the same time has this absolute moral clarity that their cause was terrible. There's no gloating, no ego, just this profound, honest humanity. That, Chernow says, is the real Ulysses S. Grant.
And this is where we get to the real heart of the book, the intellectual climax of the whole argument. Because what Chernow accomplishes here is, well, it's more than just correcting a bunch of historical facts. It's something much deeper, much more profound. It's a literary resurrection. So here's the core thesis. Chernow's ultimate achievement isn't just historical, it's literary. He doesn't just correct the record, he actually resurrects a soul. Think of it this way, he's not just showing us what Grant did, he's reconstructing Grant's inner world. He's peeling back that famous stoic exterior to show us the sensitive, thoughtful man it was built to protect. He brings a man famous for being a closed book completely to life.
And his most powerful tool for this is a kind of literary archaeology. He digs into Grant's own famously plain and simple writing style, and he argues that the writing is the final proof of his character. The prose is the man. Its direct, unadorned style, that reveals his intellectual clarity and his honesty. The humble, reserved tone, that shows a total lack of vanity and ego. And the way he talks about his foes with magnanimity, that points to a deep moral core. So the very style that critics used to mock as being too simple is in fact the ultimate proof of his depth and substance.
So what Chernow proves is that to truly understand Grant, you have to read him. And to read him is to know him. His greatness was hiding in plain sight this whole time, right there in the magnificent, straightforward sentences of his own masterpiece, the personal memoirs.
So let's bring it all home. A necessary history. Why Grant matters now. Why does a book about a guy who lived a century and a half ago feel so incredibly urgent today? Well, because the best history books don't just tell you about the past, they hold up a mirror to the present.
I mean, just look at the echoes of Grant's era that we see all around us today. The intense fights over voting rights, the terrifying rise of domestic terrorism, the huge debates over the very meaning of citizenship, and the fundamental struggle to build a real, functioning, multiracial democracy. These aren't old, dusty issues from a history book. They are the foundational, ongoing struggles of America. And Grant was right there, smack in the middle of it all.
And that's really the final verdict on this book. This isn't just a great story. It's not just a fantastic biography. It is a necessary book for anyone who wants to understand the deep, unfinished business of America. It's essential reading if you want to get why the Civil War, in so many ways, never really ended, and why the arguments from the 1870s feel so frighteningly familiar right now.
Because here's the thing. The Civil War never truly ended. And reading a book like Chernow's Grant forces us to face that difficult truth head-on. It leaves us with a really profound question, not just about the past, but about our own time. What is our role in its unfinished business?
This is the 10-Minute Book Guide, your weekly shortcut to deciding what to read next.